It's almost a thing on this channel for me to review one book and then a Ranger's Apprentice, and I'm all here for it. It is my favorite series after all. Now, The Siege of Macindaw is probably my favorite book in this series. This is of course subject to change since I haven't read all the books recently, so my memory might be mixing up things, but it's either this one or the 10th book, which is the Emperor of Nihon. But we'll see once we get there. This is only the 6th book, there's still quite a while. Now, this is also the final book where the story is split up into 2 books. This also means that it's the final short book we're going to be looking at. For me that makes sense. As fans of the series grow older, they can handle reading the longer books with no problem. Also, new fans will have 6 books to read before they get like above 400 pages. There's like 300 pages or something like that. Let's take a look. 293, so 300 pages, pretty spot on guessed actually. Now, this book was originally published in May in 2007 in Australia and in August 4th, 2009 in America. So it's fairly old and it currently stands at a 4.34 out of 5 on Goodreads with 70,000 ratings and 2,000 reviews, which is, when you think about it, pretty respectable for a children's book and being the 6th book in the series. Now let's talk about the cover. So for the cover, this is actually, for being one of my favorite books, one of my least favorite covers. And the reason for that is I get what they're going for, but I just don't think it works. The swords crossing is great and all. It's symbolic of the siege and the battle, especially with Macindaw in the distance. I know Karen's supposed to be one of them, but who's the other? Horace? I feel like it would be greater with a bow or a knife, just to symbolically say it's like a knight against a ranger, not that it would be like how the fight is gonna be played out. Make it more stylized, that's how I would say. But given our heroes are forced to be in the forest of Grimsdale Woods, setting the scene in the forest here with the castle we're besieging in the background is just, it's a great way of showing the contrast, and you're making the tower and the castle itself tall and looming because it's insurmountable task up against, and it just works so great. But the 2 knights clashing swords, I feel like it's the wrong thing, and the cover is by John Blackford. I will not blame him for it, because I feel like he probably were told, or at least got it as like, that's what we want, and then of course you have all the standard stuff up here. But it just doesn't, it sends the wrong image. It sends this as being a Horace-centered book, even though Will is our main character, and it doesn't sell it quite as well as I would have hoped. But it is the 6th book, so you could argue how important is it, but to me, quite important. Now let's talk about the book itself. This is the 2nd book in the story itself, 6th book in the Ranger's Apprentice, so we can say this is the final book in the Macindaw saga. And this is also why it started right after the previous, with Horace traveling to the castle of Macindaw. The scene with Bottle was fine. It felt like let's quickly establish how different these 2 are scenes, than actually being something relevant to the story. Also, by now we don't need another introduction to Horace, nor do we need to be reminded how everyone thinks he's dumb when he's really smart on certain things. It's book 6, we know. Now, when Will and Horace meet in the tavern, that was great fun. Flanagan has an insane ability, in my opinion, to make banter seem natural and flawless. It is such a great time whenever people banter in these books. Now, skipping to the introduction of the secret code. It's so simple yet it works. I think the type of cipher is a Polybius square, and it's a pretty simple ciphering method, but that's fine because it's used in an interesting way. It is also with this we get the first more actual flirting between Will and Alice. There's no doubt how much they like each other, but are just too shy. It's cute and great way to keep the spirit of Alice high. The explanation for how Alice can break the hypnosis seems a bit like an explanation you would give to make the solution seem more magical. I mean, when I read this, I didn't even recall the actual thing, but I was like, this is just a normal rock, isn't it? And that Alice just needs to change where she focuses on any object, and therefore any object would have worked. But even if it is because it's a magical stone, it's fine. It's more how she acts when free from hypnosis that is, that's more like that we care more about, because it's super interesting seeing how she tries to hide information from Karen, and also how she has to act like she has no idea what she said, and all of that I think is super interesting and it's fun to follow. Then we get to capturing of McHaddish, who is clearly meant to be Scottish. In general, you can tell Flanagan went with Europe as like the setting of everything and just changed the name of the people and places. And it's fine, but you do run the risk of stereotyping. But I don't think that's too much of a problem. Being I'm Scandinavian and I don't really look like a bear like the Scandinavians or Scandians apparently do, but it's fine. It's a children's book and a fantasy world inspired by Europe, and it works, and you want to keep things relatively simple for children's books. And you know, never does it feel like he's like hurting anybody. So now the interrogation of McHaddish was amazing, but also when you think about it, a bit off-putting. It definitely breaks the Geneva Conventions for torture. But it was cool, so I'm fine. I fucking loved how well Malcolm or McKellen could keep a straight face and literally scared everybody, making sure only the people who needed to know what was going on, like only the who needed to know what was going on knew what was going on. So it just worked even better to scare him because people were actually scared. And also it used already established items from previous book. It didn't come out of nowhere, but it did bring it in a new way, and that's what prevented it from being a dull thing. So I like it a lot. And then we get to my biggest gripe with this book. I get that Rangers are supposed to be the sneaky smart tacticians, but I feel like when it comes to sieging a castle, it should have been both Horace and Will who came up with the plan. Horace being inflexible is okay-ish. It would make more sense if he tried to modify conventional strategies and suggest using the visual things Malcolm has. But Will, who then realizes like how, so like Horace being like, oh, if we could just find a way of maybe scaring them or drawing their attention, maybe some lights or some like loud noises, and then we'll be like, oh wait, we can do that, or something like that, you know, showing that Horace actually tries to think this through and try and think out of the box. But that's not what we see. We just see Horace being passive and set in his way and like, no, we need 3 to 4 times the amount of soldiers, otherwise it's impossible besieging a castle. End of story. And that's just it irks me the wrong way, because that's not who I feel like Horace is at this point. I feel like he's been enough with Will and Holt to know how to think outside of the box, or at least like prompt with ideas. So otherwise I am having so much fun, but we are getting to the best part of the book, which is the rest of it. Very first thing I want to comment on is how genius I think it is for Will to create an upside down wagon to hide in. It's smart, and it does solve one of the major problems, which is getting ladders to the wall and then scaling the wall. I feel like it should have been something Horace pretty quickly would realize how smart it is. Instead it takes him forever to realize, and it, just like before, it bugs me the wrong way with how inefficient he is. And then we get to one of my favorite, which is the fake attack on the castle. And I really like we got a little of Karen's POV, just because we understand why he moves his men like he did. But it was a little frustrating that he didn't himself understand why the forest was there, or explain to us that he was scared that a small army would use to sneak up on the castle. Remember, I'm gonna call him Karen. Karen is supposedly a trained knight. Just like Horace, he should have known like, because Horace tells us the reason why the forest is there is because it's nearly impossible to get a full army up to the castle there with all the siege equipment. So he should have been like, oh, I know conventional strategy is the forest is impossible for a big army, but I have a feeling we're not going to be up against a small army or a big army. We're going to be up against a ranger with a small group of fighters. So he's going to find some sneaky way of using the forest to ambush us. So therefore I'm scared that he's going to, like, the forest is our weak point. And that would work flawlessly. It would also make Karen seem so much smarter than, you know, he supposedly is. Like, he is a trained knight, so why not? I don't know. And I love that any fight that has Scandians in it, it's always so much fun and a mess. The overall fight was pretty impressive and it wasn't too short, even though it wasn't as long as I hoped. Usually I think these major battles are too short when it's the main part of the story. But here I feel like it fitted the length of the book, and it might be because the book is not that long. And it might also, like, I think here it works great that the first book, like, if we take the entire story of Macindaw Castle and Will and all that, then yeah, the final battle is probably too short. But because it's split into 2 books, it suddenly works flawlessly. So yeah, I feel like in this case here, it really worked out great, because now it felt like it took up a appropriate amount of the story. Yeah, so yeah. Now, then let's skip ahead to Alice, Will and Karen in the tower. I like that we pretty quickly get a feeling that we don't get a feel, we're told and shown that Alice's feelings for Will are so powerful that the mesmerism, isn't it called, I think they call it mesmerism. Yeah, probably mesmerism. Well, it's basically hypnotism. That's what I'm going to be calling it, because I remember that word. There we go, now it's in frame again. It's faltering because of it, at least a little. And we also get to see Will finally acknowledging his feelings for Alice and how much that means to her. Like, these two we known since book 1, they are going to be together, but finally they're starting to acknowledge it. And this, of course, fills the next time they see each other with cringe. It was so awkward and a bit cringy. It should be. They're both young adults that have been busy with their careers and have no idea how to work on these emotions. And Will even commented on it in his own mind, like, or the narrator tells us that Will realizes this, that probably living for 5 years in a hut in the forest with an older man is probably not a great way of learning how to talk to women. Especially when that man is clearly also not good at it. So, and what I also really like is clearly Alice is the same thing. Like, she grew up in the diplomatic corps, and so she's used to all these diplomatic things that are keeping her emotions away. So she's also not emotionally trained, if you can say it like that. And so both of them are kind of the same person in this way, and we also get description that they're even like cursing themselves the same way. And I think Horace here might be right. Sometimes you can be too smart and start overthinking, because that's what they do. Like, both of them like, oh no, what if, like Will's like, oh, what if I told her that I love her? And then she just says, let's just stay friends, that would be the worst. Like, yeah, but try it. Like, clearly she likes you a lot, so yeah, I don't know. Horace at the same time is also a bit of overthink, because he's like, oh, should I force them to talk? No, because then there might be what about Evelyn and Will and their relationship and my place? Like, it gets a little overthinky, counter, like almost hypocritical in the way that he thinks, but it works. And then when Will and Marilyn, I think it was called. No, anyways, can't spend all day looking for it. Like, stood face to face. I'm so glad that Will actually got the upper hand by showing him like the concept of a Ranger being flexible and not setting your way, and basically calls him out for doing his job badly. And clearly he should know by Will being sent there that he was bad at his job, and everybody knows it. And then Horace has great timing when he steps into and uses his own title to call in what is actually going on. And then this main story ends at a bittersweet note. The three friends saying goodbye to each other, with Will and Allison not having finished their emotions, and Will in general leaves them all sad. And then we get a letter, and it's all good. The ending is super cute and funny, and I can't wait for the next book. But first we have to read another book. But let's get to the conclusion. This is a really good book. It's a lot of fun and has some top tier bantering. And the more we get to see our characters, the better. It's great to see both Will and Horace working as a team now, more as adult than teens. You can definitely feel they've grown. And for the most part, I think the book hits all the right things and the things it sets out to do. I only really have two big problems, and one of them I didn't really address, but I'm gonna address it now. And that is, Alice is basically reduced to a damsel in distress. I did comment on the previous book a little about it, and it didn't really change here, and I think that's really sad. And then there's the main part of this one, which is the stubbornness and inflexibility of Horace. I feel like he's grown too much to be this inflexible. He's supposed to be the straight man between him and Will. He's supposed to keep Will grounded in his wild ideas. But when it comes to sieging, it feels like he just gave up on solving this puzzle, even though he's the one with the background and the type of knowledge you need for this. On the plus side, Will's and Horace's banter has never been any better. They're funny, and you can tell how close friends they are. All in all, this is by far the best book in the series so far, and I can't wait to continue and see where our story goes. And the next book in the series is something special to me on a personal level. But first, we'll take a look at Anthony Ryan's Blood Song. So subscribe for that.